Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of BS Rambles. I'm going to be doing something a little bit different today. I want to break down the differences between Heroes of the Storm and League of Legends. I get asked all the time for the difference between League of Legends and Heroes of the Storm, and it's actually a pretty difficult question because League of Legends is kind of a classic standard MOBA, whereas Heroes of the Storm isn't even really a MOBA at all. It's called a hero brawler, and I think there's good reason for giving it that distinction outside of MOBA. So I want to break it down into four basic categories that differ from League of Legends to Heroes of the Storm. And the first is the length and pace of the game. A League of Legends game will go anywhere from 20 minutes if you want to forfeit early, all the way up to over an hour to end a game. Whereas a Heroes of the Storm game, that 20-minute point where it's the earliest time you can end a League of Legends game, unless it's some insane blowout, that's the point where the game is at the pinnacle, about to end. If anyone gives an inch, the other team is going to take a mile and finish the game. So the games really don't last over 20 minutes very often. In the 2 years I've been playing, I've maybe had one or two games go over 30 minutes, and those are like Bronze League style games where no one knows how to end it. To give you kind of an illustration of this, I'll tell you what's going on in both games at a minute and 30 seconds. A minute 30 seconds into a Heroes of the Storm game, any map that you're playing will have a catalyst. Some type of catalyst or objective will spawn that will force a team fight. Both teams will have all three of their basic abilities yet. They'll probably be level 1, 2, or 3 at this time. And it's going to force a team fight on both teams. A full-on team fight. 10 players battling over an objective together. A minute 30 in a League of Legends game, minions are just starting to spawn. You're probably sitting in your lane waiting to get soaking experience. So the difference in pace is astronomical. That kind of brings me to the next major difference, which is team versus individual progression in the game. In Heroes of the Storm, you progress your characters through the game with your team's level. And your team level is based on the sum of all the experience of all your teammates. So that means that you're only contributing probably 20% of the experience to your team's pool. A lot of people don't like this when coming over from League of Legends because it means that you have less opportunity to kind of carry your team and snowball out of control and be that one that has the major impact. But conversely, you get the benefit of not having one person be able to create an absolute monster on the other team. If someone dies a lot on your team in Heroes of the Storm, you might be able to make up that experience by just being an effective soaker on your team because they're only actually 20% of your team's experience gain. So it's a little bit less punishing in terms of the way that you progress your own character through the game, because if you do die in Heroes of the Storm, you still have 80% of your hero's progression coming in the form of your teammates making their way through the game as well. Now, the third major difference between Heroes in the Storm and League of Legends is the way that you increase your hero's power. And I know you might think that I just talked about that, but what I mean by this is the talent versus item systems. In League of Legends, you use items, and generally speaking, those increase your hero's stats. You still have the same 3 abilities with your ultimate, and your items will just bolster the power of those. Whereas in Heroes of the Storm, the talent system is more about customizing the way that your hero plays. An example of that might be if your hero has an AoE ability, one talent might increase the radius and cast range of that AoE ability. So as you progress through the game based on the talents that you select, your hero will play entirely differently and their abilities will interact differently with the enemies. And this theme of customizability also extends to the ultimates in Heroes of the Storm. Every hero in Heroes of the Storm has their choice between 2 entirely different ultimate abilities. And these ultimates function largely in the same way that they do in League of Legends as your long cooldown, high impact abilities. So by having 2 of them that function in entirely different ways, it drastically changes the way that you're going to be playing your hero. Maybe the most extreme example of this is a hero in Heroes of the Storm called Varian, and his ultimate actually gives him the choice of 3 different playstyles where he can either choose one that's meant for main tanking, one that's meant for being kind of an offensive bruiser, and another meant to be a high DPS assassin. The very last and probably most important thing I want to talk to you about is the way that team fights feel. And if you're like me, MOBAs are all about the team fighting. Putting your team's skill on the line against the other team's skill in direct PvP combat. And in Heroes of the Storm, these happen all the time. About every minute and a half to 2 minutes, there's going to be some map event in Heroes of the Storm that is going to bring you to a team fight. Whereas in League of Legends, they tend to be more explosive, high adrenaline, cataclysmic events. I don't want to tell you which game is better. It's all about personal preference. I think these are both amazing games. They're a couple of my favorite games that I've ever played, and I've sunk a lot of time into both of them. But the reason that I ended up switching to Heroes of the Storm is because there's more action for less playtime. I found that I was playing League of Legends for those big team fighting moments, and then when I came over to Heroes of the Storm, those moments are happening all the time. The entire game is based around those moments. In a game that lasts a third the length, I'm getting 5 times the action. And that to me was what brought me over. So surprise, surprise, the guy that runs the Heroes of the Storm YouTube channel prefers Heroes of the Storm over League of Legends. I know these were very broad strokes over both games and that there's tons of exceptions to the rules that I laid out, but I tried to boil it down to the most critical differences in the game if you are a brand new player considering which one to play. And now with all the content specific stuff out of the way, it is time for my generic YouTube outro. So if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. I'm going to throw the channel details up on the page right now. Have a look at the social media pages if you do enjoy the channel. Those are probably the best way to keep up with what I'm doing, if I'm streaming, when videos are coming out, etc. Thank you again for watching. I hope you have a great week.